On episode 15 of the Lakers Takes podcast, the Lakers went 2-2 on the week and are now 23-24 on the season. Is Frank Vogel's job in jeopardy? And the road trip is well underway. I'll get into all of this and more during today's episode. The Lakers started the week on Monday, beating the Jazz 101-95 in what can only be described as the best win of the season. This was against a top-rated team, one of the best teams in the Western Conference. So it was great to see the Lakers actually pull off this kind of win against this caliber of team. LeBron had a great game. Stanley Johnson had a great game, especially late in the game. Stanley Johnson was attacking. Stanley Johnson was going to the basket, creating havoc on the rim and putting pressure on the rim offensively. It was great to see. Same thing with Austin Reeves. He was doing all the little things, collecting his classic charges, boxing out, getting rebounds. He had a beautiful tip in over Gobert, fighting for a board. It was just an incredible hustle win from the Lakers. They were losing 78-72 to start the fourth quarter, and the fourth quarter they really stepped it up to close that gap and ultimately win the game, outscoring the Jazz 29-17 in that fourth quarter to do so. So it was really, an all-around great performance, great team win. Avery Bradley hit some key threes in that fourth quarter as well to kind of, start off that run and keep it going. And Russ definitely had the most amazing sequence with 40 seconds left, up, I believe, 5 points. He gets a defensive rebound, and he just takes it coast to coast. The entire crowd, the arena gets excited and nervous at Russ going full speed coast to coast. And you could hear in the Lakers feed, Stu Lance yell, "Stop," as Russ continues to go to the basket, not slowing down for any moment. And then, of course, Russ shoots the running layup. He makes it. It's also an and one, so you hear Stu yell "stop," and then you hear and one, and it was just a funny kind of. That's kind of the Russ experience, right? You're saying no, and then he does something great, and you're like, oh yes. So that's kind of just how it's been with Russ this year. But this game was a good game. This game was a great win, and it left I think Lakers Nation and the Lakers themselves feeling kind of high on a good performance. And then the next morning, we get a report that Frank Vogel's job is under serious threat, that he was being evaluated day to day. We saw multiple reports. The primary one I want to talk about is Sam Amick and Bill Orem of The Athletic, talking about how in jeopardy Vogel's job was due to the performance and what was expected of the team being a championship caliber, etc., etc. And I'm going to talk about Frank Vogel a little bit more later on in the pod, but it was such a perfect description of the season to have your best game be a win, and then the next day the conversation becomes, Frank Vogel and his job, and it just seemed ridiculous and unfair and like the weirdest timing because it felt like the worst time to kind of bring that up. But there we have it. Frank Vogel, his job's in jeopardy, and I don't like to talk about many rumors and speculation on this pod. I like to keep it on what happened. These are the games. This is what happened. This is who played good. This is who didn't play that good. This is how the team is playing overall. I like to keep it, keep the main thing, mainly talk about basketball and what actually happens on the court, not this player versus this player in a theoretical way, etc., etc. You get what I'm saying. But when there's this much smoke, there is some fire, and not talking about this is ignoring a big aspect of what the season is. So at this point, I kind of have to talk about it, or else I'm, ignoring it on purpose, And with Vogel, I think I've made myself clear. He's not a perfect coach, but I understand his philosophies, and he really wasn't given too much of a fair shake here. It doesn't feel fair. It was reported months ago that Frank Vogel wouldn't be judged until he had all three of the big three. Technically, he's the healthy roster, which technically he still wouldn't have because Kendrick Nunn never played. But let's just ignore Kendrick Nunn for the time. At least everyone else being healthy, mainly the main players. And if he would get fired prior to that, that wouldn't seem like you're holding your end of the bargain. Now, those were just words, and people don't hold their end of the bargain plenty, so it wouldn't be a shock, but it just goes against what they've said. So yeah, this report created shockwaves. It created so much noise, and definitely rocked the Lakers world, not because people were surprised by it, but people were like, okay, so everyone agrees that this guy needs to go, and that kind of thing kind of, fanned a flame that didn't need really fanning, but, it's the reality. So, after that game on Tuesday, that was the main conversation. It was not about the Lakers beating the Jazz. It was about Frank Vogel and his potential exit. So under those circumstances, the Lakers went and played the Pacers, who they beat last time when LeBron was hitting all those great shots and he did the silencer and all those fun things. The Lakers played the Pacers on Wednesday and unfortunately lost 111-104. This game was really interesting. It felt like the end for Vogel. You saw him kind of stick to the same rotations. You saw him, have the team lose. It's right before the beginning of a road trip, which the Lakers are going on their extended road trip here. So it felt like, narrative-wise, this seemed like maybe we should stop here. If you don't think he's going to last through the road trip, you're literally evaluating him game by game. Maybe it's good to let him go after this kind of bad performance, right? You lost to the Pacers, who are a team that, at the time were 16-29. You're clearly better than that team. You should beat them. You weren't able to. Rotations were still, what they were. You had Ariza still playing 15 minutes. Bradley's playing 24. The team's not performing well. And then the shocker was benching Russ in the fourth. And when he was asked about it after the game, Vogel mentioned that he was, putting out the players that he thought would help the team win, which implies that Russ wasn't in that group, that he was not a player that you could win with late down the stretch of a close game. It felt like that was maybe, we were all reading the tea leaves, but it felt like maybe that those are the kind of moves he normally wants to do and doesn't feel enabled and empowered to do so. But being it's his last day, he's going to go out doing the things he really wants to do because he feels empowered to do so. Again, that was all of us kind of speculating and going crazy. And we really felt like, at least I did, that, okay, Lakers lost, another bad loss. This is the end for Vogel. I was just waiting on the tweet. And we got a tweet, just not that tweet. The tweet we did get was from Chris Haynes shortly after the game was over, reporting that Los Angeles Lakers will not be making a personnel move at this juncture, and Frank Vogel will travel with the team tomorrow to coach or in Orlando on Friday, league sources tell Yahoo Sports. So the report was he doesn't have a job to lose. And I think the fact that they have to report you have a job when you clearly do have a job, I think that tells you where we're at in the discourse. And it's not a good place for you to be. So it was clear Frank Vogel's job is safe for the day, for the game, but that's about all we got. And, it's just been exhausting, honestly, with the Vogel speak and the week. And you win one, you lose one. Again, after the high of a Jazz win, you have the low of a Pacers loss. Very frustrating. And the coaching situation not really, feeling resolved because we're just hearing it's game by game. And with a team that's 500, game by game means every other game goes from good to bad. Anyway, so the Lakers then head to Orlando. They play the Magic, and again, they have a good game. They win 116-105. LeBron had a great game, 29 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. He was, he's been, on one of his best offensive tears, honestly, of his career. He's been so good. It's been incredible to watch, unfortunately, with the team not really, matching his energy or ability, but it's been great. He's been consistently the best player on the team, night in and night out. Another positive was Russ. Russ had a good game after all that drama, all that hoopla. He had 18 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists. He played really well, played down the stretch. He had a really, really good game. And off the bench, definitely the star was Carmelo Anthony. He had 23 points, 4 for 5 from 3. And when you get a Melo game like that, the Lakers usually win because that means Melo's on, he's engaged, he's focused, he's playing well. And when that happens, the Lakers usually win. And this was no exception. When Melo's going off like that, it's usually the thing that tips it over and guarantees the victory. And it was against the Magic. And the Lakers start the road trip with the W, yes, against an 8-39 at the time Magic, but we just saw them lose to the Pacers, so clearly, they're in the trenches right now. So, it was good to get the win. And then the next morning, we hear reports that Anthony Davis might be back. So far, the Anthony Davis reports have been super vague. After we passed his evaluation weeks, we got a report that there was no report on what we're doing with him and what's going on, but he's not having setbacks. It was very weird. Definitely not comforting for an organization that's had to deal with Anthony Davis and his injuries his whole time with the Lakers. I wasn't worried because I legitimately thought they just didn't want to say anything. Again, that was me reading the tea leaves, and that's what's frustrating sometimes. You gotta read in between the lines because everyone's kind of talking around the thing. And with AD, they mentioned that it was up to the point where he was questionable for the game, which is an upgrade from out or doubtful. He was questionable, and he would be a game time decision. So it was a shocker that we haven't really heard anything about him being a week away or 5 games away, and now he's might play on Sunday against the Heat. That was incredible. And ultimately, prior to the game, he was announced out and he wasn't going to play. But it's really encouraging that he was so close that it was a game time decision. For me, I was, no medical knowledge or history or anything like that. And I don't know anything about, AD's health or anything like that. But I just had the feeling that it would be first week of February. I felt like they'd be careful. They'd really make sure he's good. And that seemed like a good timetable to me for all that to get accomplished. And the fact that it might be, the last week of January, it's a week earlier than I thought, I'll definitely take it in a season that the Lakers have gotten very few good stories and good news. I'll definitely take AD coming back a week early if he's ready and raring to go. Didn't play on Sunday against the Heat, but there are, which we'll talk about later, there are 4 games coming up this week. And if he's so close to returning on Sunday, I think it's a pretty good chance we see him this week, which is definitely good news. AD on the way, all of Lakers Nation's hyped for that, and even though it was negative that he wasn't able to play, it was definitely positive that he was that close that he almost did play. And then against the Heat, very hot and cold game. Lakers lose 113-107. They were getting blown out. They were getting beat by 20 plus points in the second quarter. They had a terrible first quarter. That was really, to me, you rarely think of the first quarter as a game because there's so much basketball left. But to me, that was a game. They gave up 39 points in the first. 39. Terrible to do that in the first quarter. So they were down 14 points after one, which is hard to do in the NBA because you don't have that much time to do that. You got to basically be being outscored more than a point a minute consistently throughout the quarter. So that was a really rough quarter. That kind of decided the game. It dug the Lakers in a 14-point hole, which they continued to dig themselves deeper and deeper into in the second quarter. And it just became a struggle. They really got outscored in every quarter, first, second, and third. And the only reason they came back was they had an incredible fourth quarter. And it wasn't just garbage time minutes. It felt like that at first. It felt like the Lakers went a little bit of a run in the fourth. And, it's going to look good on paper, but we know they didn't lose by 12. They lost by 25. It was just, garbage time. The whole fourth quarter felt like garbage time until it wasn't, right? The Heat went on a 5-minute streak where they didn't score a field goal. And that's when the Lakers really closed the gap. And then when they closed the gap, the Heat were able to produce a little bit more, but the Lakers were still producing at a higher clip and still, outscoring them 8-4, 10-5, 6-2, and the Heat could feel the game literally slipping away, and they couldn't do anything to stop it. So I thought that was really impressive because it went from a game we were all kind of, over with and just watching because we love it and watching because, I wanted to cover it, and that's about it, right? There's not much to learn to, here we go. And it got really close. Ultimately, in the final minute, the Lakers just made one too many mistakes. They were down by 4 with 37 seconds left, and LeBron had the ball on the right-hand side of the court, kind of on the wing, but it was a little more right center, I would think, versus just being fully on the wing. At least that's how I remember it. And Avery Bradley was cutting to the middle, and he just accidentally ran into P.J. Tucker, which was just terrible. He ran into him, offensive foul, and then the Heat got the ball, scored a couple of buckets, killed some time on the clock. And then, of course, they iced the game when THT tried to inbound the ball, another turnover, and that was pretty much it. So the Lakers just made a few too many mistakes in the final 40 seconds of the game. They were down 4 with the ball. They had a really good chance, but it was a legitimate comeback. If you watch the game or if you rewatch it, trust me, watch that fourth quarter. It was legitimate. The Lakers really applied pressure, and I think the positive of this game as well was late in that game with about, let's say, 2 minutes left. It was a under 10-point game, like an 8-point game, and the Lakers really still needed to rally, right? You're down 8 with 3 minutes left. You need like another run inside that short amount of time to really close the gap, right? Because a couple buckets and the other team's up by 12, 14 points again, and it's over. The Lakers, what impressed me was the Lakers were able to get defensive stops to continue chipping away. It wasn't just them scoring a lot, because at that point, the Heat were awake, they were engaged, they knew what was happening, they were trying to stop it, they were trying to score and give themselves some breathing room. And the Lakers were able to still clamp down, were able to rotate, were able to challenge shots, were able to keep themselves in the game, not only with their offense, but with their defense, continuing to hold down the Heat. And that's what really impressed me about this game. I kept seeing possessions, I'm like, okay, we really need to stop here, and we got it. We really need to stop here, we got it. We really need to stop here. Oh, they hit a 3, but we hit a 3. Okay, cool. So we're still going at them. And I'm like, okay, this is something they can build on. That kind of engagement, that kind of energy. Now I'm done being at the point in the year now where I think it will lead to a positive change. It's more with the Lakers. It's more I'll believe it when I see it. They're kind of like the kid in class that is underperforming because they just don't care. Now the Lakers have more problems than just caring, but for the example. And when you see that kind of student, right? Or if you were that student, they can if they're engaged and in the mood, they can give you a B homework assignment or even get a B on a test. And then you tell them, hey, you could do this every week, like this is what you could do. And then of course they unfortunately many times don't do it the next week. They're off on Monday, they don't show up, and they didn't do the homework the next week, and you're like, it's just up and down with you because you just don't want to commit. And I'm not saying the Lakers are 500 because they don't care. I think they do care, but that kind of defensive focus and attention is possible for them to do on a consistent basis. It's not a matter of ability, it's a matter of desire. And it does take a lot of mental strain. You could see it. It's a lot of communication, a lot of hard work. They're not defensive juggernauts on the court, so they have to really, when you're working on a weakness, you have to do your best because you're not good at it, right? You're not as good at it as other things. So it's definitely a weakness on this team, but they can get up for 8 minutes and consistently stop a team. I've seen it, and this Heat game fourth quarter is a great example of that. Now, can they do that the next night and the next night and the next night when they need to? Those are the questions we need answers to. Obviously, AD solves a lot of that because that gives you another good defender on the court. But these are the things, when they look at the tape, I hope they see, hey, this can be done. You can do this. We did it on the court, but need to do it for longer stretches of time and a consistent basis. And that's been the problems defensively with this team. There are other problems with this team, of course, as well. You don't have your season be 23-24 and you only have one problem. So they have a few things to solve. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about Frank Vogel. So we've already kind of documented the drama, talked about all that's happened. And one thing I want to mention here is I'm not really pro firing Vogel, mainly because, one, you're not going to get a replacement that I think I'll be happy with. Personally, I don't think Fizdale is going to be really an improvement. Phil Handy's different. I would like Phil Handy. I just doubt he'd be the person to replace. Phil Handy, in my opinion, not gotten a fair shake at a head coaching position, and I don't think he'll get one here right now. I hope I'm wrong about that, but I just don't see it right now. So because of that, you're not going to do a big coaching search middle of a season. I just don't see that happening. So it really feels like, to me, you might as well write it out the rest of the year. Now, if your argument for not firing someone is who would I hire, you're not in a good position. So that's probably not going to be enough, but that is how I feel. The other thing is, again, he hasn't had AD. And without having the big three and seeing what he could do with that over a stretch of 10 games, it just feels unfair judging him on just Braun and Russ, who have only played these stretches together. I just don't think that's giving Vogel a fair shake. But to be honest, Vogel hasn't gotten a fair shake this whole time. He didn't get a big extension. After everything he's done, winning a championship, he only got a 1-year extension. I think that tells you already there isn't that much trust or belief in you. I think the writing was on the wall then. I think for sure he's not coming back next year unless the Lakers just have an absolutely incredible championship run. I think he's gone either way, even if things do get better. I hope he stays though. I hope they see him through. I hope he's able to see it through with this team. That's really what I want. I want to see if LeBron, Russ, and AD can work together. If they're giving time to work together, like that's just personally how I feel. Now, Vogel's no angel. He's not perfect. I don't like these Avery Bradley minutes. I don't like that Dwight doesn't get enough run. I don't like that Reeves isn't playing as much. I don't like Ariza playing at all. I think that needs to be over and done with. So there's a lot of things that I can blame, Vogel for. I'm not saying he's a perfect coach, but what I am saying is he deserves a fair shot to see it through and a fair shot to at least play a dozen games with the big three, which they should be able to do once AD returns. If AD returns and for some reason one of the three starts, missing games, then I can at least feel like, okay, we're just never going to see them together, I guess. And then you need to make a move. But I want him to get that chance, and we're just like, a day or two away from it. So let's see it, and then we can talk about it. So it's a season it's a LeBron season, and you got to win now, and there's so many other factors involved. But that's how I feel. I want Vogel to get a fair shot with the big three. Well, we don't know if AD is coming back this week, but we do know the game's happening this week. So let's talk about them. First game the Lakers have this week is on Tuesday. They're playing the Nets in what this should be like big time, preview of the finals. And at this point, it kind of feels far away from that, but it is a nationally televised game on TNT. Again, the Lakers are all on the East Coast this week, so you're going to see a lot of 4:30 starts, and this is the first one. Lakers play the Nets on Tuesday in Brooklyn at 4:30. On Thursday, they play the 76ers in Philly, again, at 4:30. Very next day, so here come the back-to-backs. Lakers play the Hornets, again, 4:30. And then on Sunday, last game of the week, the Lakers play the Hawks at 10 a.m. These are all Pacific time games, so keep that in mind if you're somewhere else. Maybe this is good for you. For us here on the West Coast, these times are not fun. They're like too late or too early, really. They don't really work with a lot of our schedules. Traditional work is 9 to 5, so that means you get home by 6, the game's pretty much over. So these are always tough to watch and tough to kind of schedule around. But definitely that Sunday 10 a.m. is just cruel, from a West Coast perspective. But hey, it's the East Coast trip. You don't get too many of these a year. So here's one of them. They had one earlier this year. So we'll see how the Lakers do. Last week they went 2-2. This week, I think another 2-2 is probably a good guess. Hard to win both the Thursday and Friday games. I think they'll win the Hawks game. So then they just need another victory, one of the back-to-backs or the Lakers-Nets one. So I think 2-2 is a safe bet. And then we're essentially done with January. And we'll recap what's been going on and preview the February games next week as well. So that concludes this episode of the Lakers Takes podcast. This was a good one. This was a fun one. I think it was nice to kind of dig into not only the game by game, but some of the outside stuff. And hopefully we see the Lakers at least go 2-2, ideally 4-0, right? But I think 2-2 is a realistic possibility. Hopefully AD comes back. Hopefully Vogel gets a chance to work with all three and keep his job, but that's an ongoing situation. So we'll see what happens. I'm optimistic they can have a good week, have AD back, and Vogel can start to really implement the team the way he originally intended. So we'll see what happens. We'll talk about it, and I'll be here next week discussing those games and breaking all that down. So I'll talk to you then. Peace.